The question of authenticity is a very interesting one in the world today because with social media and AI and the internet and everything, it's really never been easier to put up this fake image that everybody believes who you are. But when we talk about authenticity, it's difficult to define because unless you're talking about exactly who you are in the present moment and kind of locking that down and not changing anything, not improving anything, you're stuck with this version. And the tricky thing about defining what's the real you is that almost every part of yourself is changeable. Some things are basically immutable and you don't have much control over that, like how your voice sounds, the way your vocal cords are formed, your IQ, stuff like that. But pretty much every part of your personality and your behavior is completely mutable, completely changeable, because that is really a function of choices and then the habits that come from those choices, not just a hard reality and a hard fact of who you are. And so I've really stepped back since the end of last year, 2025, as of this video, from the content creation space because, I like it. I enjoy talking about stuff like this. But right now, the beginning of 2026, I'm really just focused on buckling down and making money. And so I still enjoy this, but there's something kind of missing. And I'm no stranger to the fact that it's probably going to take a while before anything that I am producing is really reaching a wide audience. And so the question is like, well, am I just talking about things that I think are going to go viral, or things that kind of fall in the Venn diagram of things that I'm interested in and then things that I think people will like, or am I just talking about the things that I want to? So the reason that I've been in personal development for the longest time, really since it really started to kick off like 2019, 2020, but I've always been a very idealistic person. I've always kind of seen the beauty in the world. I think, the fact that I've been blessed with a pretty strong faith from a young age is a very large part of that. But all that is to say that there's a lot of questions of what direction I want to take this in. Because self-improvement, I think is very good and necessary. And I think that the world needs good elite people right now. If you're in the top 1%, the top 0.1%, whatever, by definition, you're not the average. And that doesn't mean that the average person can't also do awesome things, but we're at the point where it seems like society and culture and everything are in such disarray that the only way we can make the average better is if we have, elite at the top, if you will, to kind of push things in that direction to create opportunities for the average person. I have been, the blessing and the curse. I think I've received a greater than average ambition. And that's not to say that I think I'm better than anyone else. It's just, I think I want to do more with my life than the average person. Now, pretty much all of us, if you're watching this, we probably want very similar things. We want to have a good life, make a decent amount of money, raise a family. But I think I'm willing to pay an unusual price. Maybe that's just because, I'm very young, very early on in my career, and so I don't have much to lose. I don't have, a spouse or kids or even a goldfish that I need to worry about. It's just me that I got to take care of. So maybe that's just, the station of life where I can be more risk-oriented, and not really holding anything in reserve. But whatever the case, I do think that we're at a point in history where being average is not going to get you anywhere good. And so in the long term, like I said, the elites might be able to drag the average up to a higher standard. But in the short term, and probably within my, functional lifespan, to say nothing of old age when, you start to turn into, an arthritic, crotchety old dude. In the short term, it seems that the only people that are going to have a great life are going to be the exceptional people. And so I intend to be part of that. And my hope with this and everything that I talk about is to reach and then work with the people that are aligned, that do want to make those ridiculous risk reward calculations, that do want to be insane and just bash their head against a wall because things aren't working, but just be too stubborn and refuse to quit. And hopefully we get enough of us. We get a small tribe going, gets bigger, has kind of a ripple effect through society. Because I think that we really, in our individualistic culture that has a center on ourselves, we really underestimate just how powerful it is to have more than just you at bat. Like if you have a whole team of people at your back, people that are united with a common cause, common ideals, looking for a common destiny, that is really where great things start to happen. I mean, that's the foundation of pretty much every great society throughout history, is a bunch of dudes that were like, hey, maybe things are good and we're going to make them better, or maybe things are terrible and we're not going to stand for it and we're going to put it back in order. But you cannot be average. The average is not going to cut it with the way the economy is going and so on and so forth. And not to make this a huge rant, but the point is, with this channel, I think the most important thing for our age is to learn how to think, how to be intelligent. And intelligence is the ability to create an accurate model of the world. So you're able to take the particular events of life and experiences and data points and then generalize it into a model that has decent predictive power, so you can actually say, okay, well, this and this and this has happened in the past, therefore it's very likely that this thing will happen in the future, or therefore if I make this move, I can expect this outcome. And that's the only real functional use of intelligence. There's some people will say that intelligence is like book smarts, but as somebody that learned a bunch of has a ridiculous knowledge, or it's kind of tapered off now, but middle school, high school, I had an extensive knowledge of Marvel Comics, Dungeons and Dragons, a bunch of fantasy worlds, and I still care very deeply about the lore of a bunch of these fantasy settings, and so I still have space for that. But just knowing those things, that's not a function of intelligence, right? That's memorization. Intelligence, and more importantly, I think especially for our age, with so much information and knowledge available through the internet, we really have a lack of wisdom. And that's the kind of thing that only really comes through experience and practical application. Because I can read all the business books that I want, but until I take those principles and put them into action, I have no idea if they actually work for me or not. And then the wisdom is what comes from taking your theory, your intelligence, and then testing it in the structure of life with the natural order and the natural laws that just kind of constrain what we operate in, and see how the cards fall. So in service of creating an accurate model of the world, I think it is very important to learn how to think. And we hear this all the time. It's kind of cliche. Don't let people tell you what to think. Learn how to think, and all that, and people whining about the education system and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think that the deep questions of life, which usually are more controversial because they touch on more fundamental parts of the human experience and core assumptions that other people may have about life that don't align with yours, gets kind of controversial, but that's the more interesting side of life, and it's the more meaningful one as well. Like, I can memorize 100 facts about superhero movies. That doesn't really do anyone good, versus one factoid that can be taken into account to, be a little bit of a better friend, make a little bit more money, have a little bit more impact in the community, have a little bit of a deeper faith. Like that, those are the little pieces of information that are really valuable and important, because instead of just having a dopamine hit of learning something in the moment, it has a ripple effect and hopefully improves the trajectory of your life, or at least is something you can add on to that predictive model that is going to give you a better understanding of the world. Because the only way that we can hope to fix the problems that we have in any area of life, whether it's personal or out in the world or our communities or our families or politics or whatever, none of those problems are going to be fixed if you can't accurately diagnose the issue. If you go into the doctor and you have tuberculosis and you say, "Doctor, I'm sick," and the doctor says, "You look sick. We're going to amputate your leg." They've given you a prescription, but they haven't actually gone to the trouble of diagnosing what is affecting you. And so if you don't have an accurate understanding of what the issue is and the levers that you can pull to improve that situation, the only way that you can be right about something, right about the fix, is by accident. By definition, accidents are not deliberate and they're not repeatable. And so the only way for us to have a decent shot and a hope of really changing the world for the better and being the men and women of virtue that we're called to be, the only way that's possible is if we have an accurate model to actually understand the world and then understand not only what the solution is to that, but how we can arrive at that. And so this channel and my content creation and everything is not really going to be niche specific. I toyed for a couple months last year about niching into something specifically business related, and I do think that's important and that's interesting, but I'm going to be talking more broadly about things that interest me, going with the whole idea of like I am the niche. So you can expect a lot of self-improvement and mindset stuff, because I think that is critical. A lot of things, just understanding like the tools that you have at your disposal to approach life. And so that would be more kind of the raw information, the intelligence, knowledge side of things. We'll touch a lot on culture. I'm not really interested in the day-to-day news cycle of politics. I do personally have an interest in those things, but I'm not really interested in talking about them because we already have plenty of people that are talking about the day-to-day politics. And frankly, I don't have the time or the interest to keep up with every single thing in the news cycle and then realize, oh, that report was wrong because the first report is always wrong, and then have to go back and correct myself. And so we will be talking about current events, but not through the lens of like liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, and so on. Obviously, I have my biases. But this will be through the lens of understanding culture and human nature and looking for patterns that, again, we can apply to that predictive model to have a better understanding of the operational environment in which we exist. And then hopefully, having a model to improve the things that are going well and, get rid of the things that are going poorly. So we'll be talking a lot about that. Faith is very important to me, so probably touch on that in passing. I'm not foreseeing this becoming a theologically focused project, but who knows over time. There are certainly elements of it that I do think are very important to understand. So we may touch on that from time to time. But yeah, so that is just kind of a general overview of where my mind is with what I want to do with this, what I want to make of it. And again, my vision for this is to build a tribe, build a community, like-minded people, and hopefully, start to have that ripple effect. And even if all you do is consume the content, even if you, viciously disagree with me, that's totally fine. I just want to put ideas out there and things for consideration. And then hopefully we can get enough people on the right track, especially in the younger generations. Because, we've got all these gurus and everything that are, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old, and that's great, but just because they grew up in a different time, they have a completely different frame of reference for the world. Not to say they don't have any value to add. Obviously they would. You'd hope if someone is positioning themselves as an expert, and they're older, you'd hope that they would know what they were talking about if they have, 20 or 30 extra years of business experience or financial experience or mindset development or whatever. You'd hope that they'd have value to offer with that. But this is more of a kind of a peer-to-peer approach. Like I'm trying to figure out the world, my place in it, really who I want to be, and then to find those tools that are going to be most useful along the path, and then hopefully share that and help you to think a little and improve your predictive model. Because, as I said, it's very much possible to have a great life, but it's not going to happen by accident. And the average and the conventional path is very clearly breaking down. So that is just not a good bet, because the only way that any stability exists in any system is with enough presuppositions underlying it, enough building blocks. And so the only reason that, for example, my dad would say that he has job security is because there are enough bricks in place underneath that, like the company he's working for, his experience in the industry, his resume, that he believes he can stay reliably employed. But no matter how solid the foundation is, if you pull out enough of those bricks, it's going to come crumbling down. And we are in a time of history right now that is just headed into chaos. The old paradigms by which we are operating, by and large, don't seem to work. The basic assumptions that we've made as a society about human nature and how society should be structured and morality and all these different things don't work. They're like that line from No Country for Old Men, if your rule brought you to this, of what use was the rule? Not to say that the rule in itself is inherently bad, but clearly there are some dysfunctions along the way. And so the conventional route, the safe route that worked for our grandparents and our parents, is not reliable for us anymore because enough of those bricks have been torn away. And so it's up to us to either decide to repair those and basically just reverse the clock, which is probably going to lead us to the exact same place, or figure out a different way of operating to move forward in a different operating theory, which, we're human beings, so it's probably not going to be perfect. But hopefully with this past experience and the history and the knowledge that we can draw on from our parents and grandparents, we'll be able to build something better, which again is not going to happen by accident. And that is why it is so critical for us to not only be intelligent, but to be wise. And also, I should say, to be courageous. There's a line from, I believe it was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It was one of the Russian novelists that was writing around the time of the Russian Revolution. He has a line of like, if every household had armed themselves with hatchets behind the door, the army or police or enforcers, whatever it was, would have been unwilling to come to the door and arrest them because there was a personal risk of death, and the whole machine would have ground to a halt. Now that's an extreme example. Obviously, I sincerely hope that we never get anywhere even approaching that in the West, but it's not enough to just be smart. We also need the conviction and the fortitude to act on what we know and believe to be right. And that's really the ultimate test of like, do you actually believe in your worldview, or is it just this nice sounding delusion that makes you feel like a good person, but when push comes to shove, you don't actually stand for it? So again, in summary, we need to be smart, we need to be wise, and then we also need to figure out how to actually direct that and how to take the calculated risks that are going to make society better. And this is another reason that community is so essential, because it is much easier to take risks when you have other people at your back. Like if you look at things historically, if it was just like you and your wife and your kids and you were a caveman living out in the wilderness, it's very dangerous if you go out and hunt for a week and then come back with food for the family, because you don't know if they'll be attacked by other tribes or wild animals, or get buried in a rock slide or whatever, struck by lightning. You're not there to address it. But if you have a tribe of other dudes, then some of you can stay behind and protect the village, and some of you can go out and hunt. And that is the exact same principle here, just on a larger scale. It is much easier to take risks if you've got other people that can see to your duties and kind of cover that gap. And this is also part of the reason that it's such a good time to be a young person, because with all those presuppositions about the world torn away, we have a ton of opportunity. And it could go either way. It could be great, it could be terrible. And there are some people that are going to win and there are some people that are going to lose, but at least we have the opportunity to actually do that, like take control of our own destinies, to make something of ourselves, and if we position ourselves correctly, the agency to actually make massive change occur, as opposed to these just like minor increments that our parents saw of like a change in the tax code or something like that. We really have an opportunity to have a sweeping effect, not just on our communities and our nation, but the West as a whole. And that is really a beautiful thing. But as the Bible says, right, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so it's not reasonable to think that we can just bumble our way without any preparation or care or virtue of our own, and we can just kind of fumble and bumble into a better future. Like the only way that that's going to happen reliably is if we have an actual plan and strategy for that. And so that is what I'm hoping to contribute to, and that is the effect that I'm hoping to have positively in your life, because I think that is really, the only option that we have, and it's really a beautiful one. It is such a gift to be alive and to have this chance, and I want us to give it our all, because it's not guaranteed, but we're going to get a shot at it, and I want us to be well positioned to do that. So that is again just kind of a summary of where my thoughts are with this, and the direction I'd like to see things go, the impact I want to have, and the project going forward. So I'm not really going to have a consistent upload schedule necessarily. That may change as I kind of get my feet under me more this year and have more time to devote to it. But that is the general project. So in the meantime, if there are any topics that you would like to see me tear apart or delve into, or subjects, ideas, anything that might be a useful addition to other people's mental models, please let me know. Obviously, you can find me at Gabriel Schickler on Instagram. That's the most reliable place to reach me. But other social media platforms as well at the same. And until next time.